Why are you speaking out about this, especially when you know so many people there, you love so many people there? Why have you chosen to do this?
Well, I'm not really sure how I got into this situation, to be honest. About 5 years ago, my oldest daughter was a student at Biola. We are a three-generation Biola family. My husband's parents both went there. My husband and I both graduated from Biola in the early 1990s. And then we started saving when our children were born to be able to, for them to go to Biola when it was time. And it was a lovely experience that we had at Biola. I love the institution. And I think there's some unique features about Biola that set it apart from a lot of other Christian colleges. And when my daughter came home during the pandemic, I realized very quickly that her faith was in trouble.
Mm,
And she had been exposed to a lot of ideas that I considered to be fairly progressive and progressive leaning, but it was in a wrapper of Christian discipleship and love for neighbor. And I was concerned. And so I thought, well, surely this is a mistake. This is just one or two rogue profs. I can get to the bottom of this. I still know a lot of people at Biola. I had been on faculty, adjunct faculty 3 times in my adult life in different seasons of my life. So I know a lot of people there. And so I started reaching out and saying, hey, like, what's going on? And that led to many private meetings. I would say at least 15 to 20 private meetings with deans, department chairs, um, parents, former students, current students, just a lot of different people, staff members. And as a result of all of those conversations, I started noticing a pattern and a story arc that the problems at Biola were not just one or two rogue profs, but that it was ideology that was a system that was embedded from the top down. And I do mean the tippy top down. And it took me a while to get into reality about it and to accept that because this
mm,
institution that I had loved and that the president had led us to believe was still faithful and that they were still on their core mission of standing strong as a conservative voice in the middle of all of the progressive noise. That was what was sold to us as parents. And when I started realizing, oh, there's a forward facing on paper faithfulness here, but behind the scenes, there are some things happening in some departments that are pretty out of step with the historic Christian worldview. I began to talk about it and write about it in 2020 and 2021, but that was only after I had had many private conversations because people are going to come on here and say, well,
mhm.
why are you doing this publicly? Why didn't you go to them first? I did that. I did that many times over. And um, when I realized that polite private conversations were not going to change anything, and we can talk about that if you want, the kind of the final straw for me in that moment. I told the highest levels of leadership that I would use my platform to expose what was happening. And I stopped after about 2021 because I was tired. I felt alone. I felt like no one else was talking about it. Nobody was interested in the conversation. So I kind of stopped. But those blog posts remained on my website with all the documentation. And then when you had text, I think I did one more podcast last year when they dissolved the diversity and inclusion department. So I thought that was a good step forward. But then when you and I had a text exchange back in the around the first week of October, and you made a Twitter post, and then later that same day, Monique and I went on a live stream and read the gender policies on a live stream on a Sunday afternoon. I was not prepared for the response because for me, I've been talking about this for 5 years. I couldn't get anybody to listen or care. But the the response since early October has led to me doing a considerable amount of more research and more content um, as to try to make a case publicly to save the institution that I love. And that's what all of this is about. It's about love. I'm fighting for Biola because I love Biola. This is not about trying to close them down. I'm not even really trying to shame them. I am trying to maybe point out some rot, but that's not to say that they haven't made some good changes. And again, we can talk about that later. But I choose to fight for Biola because I wanted to endure for another generation. And I also want parents to have informed consent. And I do have some concerns about transparency.
Right. And so back in October, when I had made a post about Biola, I had basically just found there's two different sexuality statements. So there was kind of the original one that's really orthodox, no issues, no problems. But I couldn't believe what I was reading when I read this kind of more, I guess, how it's applied. And I'm trying to find the post here because I do think it's important to talk about, even at one point, how it was saying, that Biola asks transgender individuals to wait until they're not at Biola anymore to do a medical transition, which of course is allowing for the category of transgender to be an identity category that would be, at least according to the statement, if a professor were affirming of a trans identity, then that would give them room to do that. There was tons of concessions to the language of queer theory. And so let's go, though, to the straw that broke the camel's back for you back then, because I think that is relevant to the conversation.